Think about the last time you sat in a doctor's office waiting for an X-ray result.
Oh, yeah. Sitting on that
Yeah.
crinkly paper.
Yeah, that paper. And the room smells faintly of, like, antiseptic wipes.
And you are just holding your breath, right?
Absolutely. The doctor walks in, slaps the film onto the light board, and points to a sharp, jagged white line across the bone.
Right.
And in that specific moment, despite the throbbing in your arm, there is a strange psychological relief.
Which sounds crazy, but it is so true.
You have a precise diagnosis. I mean, the machinery of your body has broken in a measurable, quantifiable way.
Yeah, you can point to the shadow on the screen and say, well, there is the problem.
That is it. We crave that kind of diagnostic precision in every area of our lives. We want suffering to make logical sense.
We really do. We want it to be clean, visible, and categorized.
So welcome to Reformed Thinking. I am so glad you were joining us.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are stepping into a diagnostic landscape that is, well, incredibly murky. It is highly resistant to easy answers.
Very resistant. Human life is saturated with physical and emotional suffering.
It is everywhere. We see disease, grief, relational fractures, systemic cruelties.
And the secular world routinely points to this sheer volume of suffering as airtight proof that a loving, sovereign creator cannot possibly exist.
Right. So we are taking two rigorous theological treatises and placing them side by side for this deep dive.
What are the sources today?
The first is an examination of C.S. Lewis's apologetics regarding the problem of pain.
A heavy hitter.
Yeah. And the second is an exposition of the Apostle Paul's writings, specifically his staggering theological arguments in Romans chapter 8.
That is a lot of ground to cover.
It is. But our mission is to understand how historic Christian theology views suffering. We want to see that historic Christianity does not view pain as an argument against God.
No, not at all. It views it as a reality inextricably tied to divine revelation, the historical fall of mankind, and the cross of Christ.
So as we dive in, let's establish something right up front.
Sure. The Christian faith refuses to offer a sanitized, pain-free philosophy.
I think that is a huge misconception people have.
It is. There is no attempt in these historical texts to shrink the scale of human misery.
You will not find any effort to minimize the sting of death, or to pretend that disease is just, an illusion.
Right. The theological framework presented here insists on a brutal realism.
It looks the horrors of the world square in the face.
And it asserts that we can only make sense of this darkness when we view it through the lens of a sovereign creator who has spoken into the void.
And Lewis makes a brilliant observation right at the beginning of his work that completely shifts how we even define the problem of pain.
It really does flip the script.
He says, if we assume the universe is a cold, mechanistic accident, just blind physical forces.
Atoms bumping into other atoms for billions of years.
Yeah, exactly that. If that is true, then pain is not an intellectual dilemma at all.
Is it just biological friction?
Yes. In a purely naturalistic universe, animals eat other animals.
Cells mutate uncontrollably.
Stars burn out and collapse.
And human beings feel pain simply because we evolved nervous systems wired for basic survival.
Right. So in that scenario, you would never look at your own suffering and ask the cosmos, well, why is this happening to me?
No, you would just accept it as the unthinking cost of existing in a random universe.
The actual intellectual crisis only materializes because believers claim a sovereign, loving creator is actively ruling this universe.
Spot on. Christianity actually creates the intellectual problem of pain.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. The skeptic uses suffering as a weapon against the Christian worldview, but Lewis turns that argument inside out.
How so?
Well, if human beings lacked a holy standard of goodness written on our hearts, we would lack the moral vocabulary to be outraged by cruelty.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. When the atheist looks at a tragedy, say a natural disaster or a horrific war, and declares, this is wrong, this is unfair, a good God would not allow this.
They're making a moral judgment?
Yes. That person is actually borrowing the Christian moral framework to launch their complaint.
Because if we are just highly evolved stardust, there is no fair or unfair.
Right. There is no cosmic justice. There just is.
The outrage we feel when we see a child suffering, it is a distorted echo of our lost communion with the Creator.
We are crying out for a standard of justice that we intuitively know should exist.
But we cannot find it in the bare, raw facts of nature.
Absolutely not.
Think about it like this. Imagine walking through the woods, way off the trail, miles from anywhere.
Okay.
You kick something in the dirt, and it turns out to be a rusted, twisted piece of metal.
Sure.
You don't look at that rusted metal and judge it for being broken.
Yo, you wouldn't.
You don't get angry at it. You don't demand to know why it isn't functioning. It is just a piece of nature now, subject to the element.
It is just doing what metal does in the dirt.
Right. But if you walk into a high-end factory and you pay a premium for a brand new, highly engineered machine,
Oh, yeah.
and the manufacturer claims it was built flawlessly, you have a completely different expectation.
Well, very different.
If that machine breaks down on day one, you are furious.
Because someone claimed it was built to operate perfectly.
Yes. We only look at the world and scream that it is broken because we have a lingering, ingrained expectation of a flawless design.
That makes a lot of sense. The tension is figuring out how we handle the reality of this brokenness without dismissing the pain.
Right, while still holding on to the claim that a perfect creator made it.
And we recognize the brokenness specifically because the blueprint of the original design is still etched into our conscience.
And I appreciate how Lewis approaches this entire tension.
He has intense pastoral humility, right?
Very much so. He does not write as a detached academic sitting in an ivory tower, dispensing sterile philosophical formulas about how suffering builds character.
No, he openly confesses his own intense dread of suffering.
He does.
He admits that even the mental imagination of serious physical pain is utterly intolerable to his own psychology.
That specific admission makes his apologetics so much more credible, don't you think?
100%.
Yeah.
He quotes the medieval English mystic Walter Hilton in his writings.
Oh, right.
He asks for mercy because his own spiritual maturity lags so far behind his lofty theological principles.
He essentially says, I am writing these high-minded theological truths about the necessity of pain, but I am terrified of a simple toothache.
Which is so relatable that preemptively silences the charge that the Christian apologist jokes about scars because he has never actually felt a wound.
Yeah. He is writing from a place of admitted weakness.
Acknowledging that the theology he is defending is far heavier than his own emotional capacity to bear it.
And his honest humility stands in stark contrast to modern prosperity gospels.
Oh, drastically.
The prosperity gospel promises a sanitized, pain-free, earthly life through therapeutic moralism.
It suggests that if you possess enough faith or say the right prayers, you will bypass the darkness of the human experience.
But historic Reformed theology rejects that superficial diagnostic entirely.
It really does. Authentic Christian theology begins with the recognition of our absolute dependence upon divine grace.
It recognizes that the goal of theological inquiry is not to eliminate the mysteries of providence.
No, it is to humble the human intellect before the majesty of the Creator. We are not trying to solve God.
Right. We are trying to submit to him.
So, to truly grasp the weight of the submission, we need to examine the raw indictment that the secular mind brings against the cosmos.
Let's do that. Because when you look through the cold analytical spectacles of fallen human reason, the physical universe appears to be an exercise in staggering scale and terrifying indifference.
It is massive and empty.
Yeah, the vast majority of the cosmos consists of empty, dark, unimaginably cold space.
And biological life is a microscopic anomaly clinging to a tiny, fragile speck of dust we call Earth.
Even on this tiny speck of dust, the living things occupying it do so under a horrific regime of mutual destruction.
The entire biological order seems predicated on consumption.
The lower forms of life are relentlessly consumed by the higher.
And as biological consciousness develops in more complex animals, this consumption is accompanied by the agonizing reality of physical pain.
Then you have man, the highest of these earthly creatures, possessing a fragile quality called reason.
And according to the secular view, this reason primarily functions to amplify his suffering beyond anything the animal kingdom experiences.
How so?
Well, reason allows man to foresee his own inevitable physical decay and death.
Oh, I see.
An animal might feel panic in the literal moment of an attack, but a human being can lay awake staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning.
Dreading a medical appointment that is still 3 weeks away.
Exactly. Our intellect casts a permanent, suffocating shadow of dread over our brief existence.
And worse, our intellect allows us to devise 100 sophisticated, cruel contrivances to inflict untold misery upon our fellow man.
Human history, when viewed purely objectively, is a tragic, blood-soaked record of war, tyranny, disease, and systemic oppression.
It is a really dark picture.
But what is truly striking about the Reformed response to this bleak assessment is that it does not deny a single fact on the ground.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, the secular description of the world's cruelty is highly accurate.
But the secularist misapplies the data.
Yes, they do. The secularist looks at the cosmos, sees the carnage and declares, well, this proves there is no loving God.
However, the secularist is observing a creation currently operating under a divine judicial curse.
Romans 8:20 through 22 tells us that the creation was subjected to futility.
So the physical decay, the carnivorous biological order, the relentless march of entropy, these are not features of the original pristine design.
No, they are the visible historical consequences of the fall in Genesis.
And the unregenerate mind looks at this broken post-fall creation and falsely assumes it represents the original intended design.
Because spiritual eyes are darkened by sin, the natural man attributes the cruelty of accursed nature directly to the character of God.
He concludes the power behind the universe must be impotent, indifferent, or actively malicious.
But that creates a massive historical paradox.
Right. If the natural world is so terrifying, how did our ancestors ever come up with the idea of a benevolent God in the first place?
It is a great question. If you are a primitive human watching your crops fail, your children succumb to disease, and your neighbors slaughtered by invading armies.
Your empirical observation of the world does not scream loving creator.
Not at all. If human religion were an inductive conclusion drawn from an empirical observation of physical nature, it would be an act of utter madness.
Nobody would ever come to that conclusion.
Right. No rational observer looking strictly at the wasteful, ruthless, and painful course of natural events would ever conclude that the ultimate reality behind the universe is a God of infinite love.
The direct inference from a black, suffering cosmos to an infinitely wise and good creator is an intellectual chasm that human logic simply cannot bridge.
It is too wide a gap.
I think modern people fall into a chronological snobbery here, though.
Oh, definitely.
We assume our ancestors were just naive optimists.
We think primitive people lived in a cozy, flat earth illusion.
And they believed in God because they didn't understand the harsh realities of science.
But medieval scholars, following the ancient astronomer Ptolemy, already knew that the Earth was a mere microscopic mathematical point in relation to the vast, terrifying distance of the fixed stars.
They knew the universe was huge, silent, and intimidating.
And prehistoric man felt the hostile immensity of the natural world howling nightly at his doors.
Our Christian heritage did not begin in a pristine, comfortable, risk-free laboratory of philosophical speculation.
No, it began among the ancient Jews, a people continually squeezed between aggressive, warlike empires.
They were repeatedly defeated, led into captivity, and intimately familiar with national and personal suffering.
They did not have the luxury of modern anesthetics or advanced medicine.
Pain was a constant, intimate companion.
So, since mankind could not have logically deduced a loving God from observing a terrifying natural world,
The knowledge of God had to come from a supernatural intrusion.
yes, God had to break into the closed system of human experience.
And that brings us to a major theological distinction that the texts spend a lot of time on.
Which one?
The difference between general revelation and natural theology.
Oh, this is a massive point in historic Reformed orthodoxy.
Can you walk us through it?
Sure. Natural theology attempts to construct a solid proof for the existence of a loving God, purely from the pleasantries and designs of the natural world.
Okay.
It looks at a beautiful sunset, or the intricate design of a flower, or the precision of the human eye, and tries to build a logical bridge to God's benevolence.
But natural theology fails miserably because it cannot account for the reality of suffering.
That is right. The sunset is beautiful, but the tsunami that wipes out a coastline is devastating.
You cannot build a theology of a loving God based on nature when nature is actively trying to kill you.
You really can't. Chapter 1 of the Westminster Confession articulates the concept of general revelation, which is vastly different from natural theology.
General revelation states that the light of nature and the works of creation show the power, wisdom, and goodness of God, leaving all men utterly without excuse.
And this relies heavily on the Apostle Paul's argument in Romans 1.3. However, because of the fall, this general revelation is suppressed in unrighteousness. Nature reveals God's power and divine nature, but fallen human beings actively push that knowledge down.
They do not want to see it.
No, they don't.
I try to picture it for the listener like this. It is like trying to guess the personality of an author by reading a book where half the pages have been burned and rewritten by a malicious editor.
That is a great visual.
You can see brilliant flashes of writing, you can see remnants of a beautiful plot, but the story currently in your hands is chaotic, violent, and disjointed.
You cannot figure out the author's true intent or character just from reading the damaged book.
You need the author to step into the room and speak to you directly. You need a separate, clear revelation.
And Paul did not try to prove God's benevolence to the pagan world by pointing to a pain-free existence.
No.
He did not say, look at how comfortable your life is, therefore God loves you.
Rather, he asserted that the natural man already knows God's eternal power and divine nature through what has been made, but has actively exchanged that truth for a lie.
The knowledge is present in the conscience, but the fallen human will suppresses it to maintain moral autonomy.
So, if nature alone isn't enough to give us a clear picture, how did God reveal himself?
Lewis outlines 4 specific strands of divine disclosure.
These are the structural components of divine revelation that press down on the human conscience, forcing humanity to reckon with the divine. Let's look at strand 1.
Okay, the numinous.
Yeah. Lewis defines this as a specific, uncanny dread and awe.
He is careful to distinguish the numinous from standard physical fear, though.
What is the difference?
Well, if you are sitting in a room and someone tells you there's a hungry tiger on the other side of the door, you feel physical fear.
Right.
That fear is based on a rational perception of physical danger. You're afraid the tiger will break in and eat you.
Makes sense.
But if someone tells you there is a mighty supernatural spirit in the next room, the resulting emotion is entirely different.
You aren't afraid the spirit will eat you.
No. You feel an uncanny shudder. It is a massive prostration of the soul before a transcendent unearthly presence.
The Hebrew text uses the terms pashad or yira to describe this specific trembling of the creature when confronted with the presence of the Holy Creator.
Like Jacob at Bethel in the book of Genesis.
Exactly. He wakes up from his dream of the ladder reaching to heaven, and his first reaction is not, wow, this place is physically dangerous, I might get mugged by bandits.
No, he says, how dreadful is this place?
It is the inescapable human awareness of a supernatural, holy presence haunting the cosmos. It is the feeling that you are being watched by something immense.
And building on that uncanny dread, strand 2 is the moral law.
This is the internal conviction of an absolute ought and ought not.
Right. Reformed theology identifies this as the lex naturalis, the natural law written on the human heart.
Romans 2.15 states that the law is written, or grapton, on the heart with the conscience, or synodesis, bearing witness.
People try to analyze human desires, biological drives, and social utility to explain morality.
But you can never derive the absolute imperative of ought purely from biological survival.
You really can't get "you shall not murder" from a biological imperative that says the strong survive by killing the weak.
The moral law is a transcendent standard. We did not invent it. We all acknowledge it exists when someone wrongs us, and we all systematically fail to practice it ourselves.
Which creates a massive, universal sense of guilt.
So humanity is stuck with this terrifying numinous presence haunting the universe and this internal moral law that constantly condemns our behavior.
And that sets up strand 3, the identification. And this is a spectacular historical leap.
Tell us about that leap.
Well, in many pagan cultures throughout history, the terrifying amoral spirits of nature had absolutely nothing to do with the ethical discussions of the philosophers.
The gods of the thunder and the ocean were powerful, but they weren't necessarily good.
No, they were capricious and petty.
The historical jump occurred when the ancient Jews realized that the terrifying numinous spirit of the mountaintops,
The god of the thundercloud and the earthquake.
yes, that he is the very same righteous lawgiver who demands absolute ethical holiness.
They declared that the terrifying creator is also the righteous Lord who loves righteousness, as seen in Psalm 11.7.
I can't think of anything more terrifying to a guilty conscience than discovering that the inexplicable, overwhelming force behind the universe is armed with the absolute, uncompromising demands of the moral law.
It means you are accountable to the storm.
The lightning bolt isn't random, it has a moral standard.
That realization prepares the world for strand 4, the incarnation.
Jesus arrives in the timeline of history claiming to be this exact lawgiver.
Into this prepared matrix of Jewish monotheism, a man is born who claims to be one with this numinous moral lawgiver.
The claim is so shockingly transcendent that it leaves zero room for the modern secular caricature of Jesus as a mild-mannered, great moral teacher.
Right. If Christ's claims about forgiving sins and judging the world were false, he was not a good man.
He was either a raving lunatic or a deceptive demon.
But if his claims are true, humanity must fall at his feet and confess him as Lord. There is no middle ground.
I see people constantly trying to frame Jesus as a passive philosopher who showed up to offer academic solutions to the problem of pain.
They want him to be a first-century life coach.
But he didn't come to explain away our physical agony with clever syllogisms. He stepped into the timeline to physically absorb human agony and to absorb divine wrath.
He came to bear the infinitely weightier spiritual agony of divine wrath against our sin in his own body on the tree.
He didn't give a lecture on pain. He subjected himself to it.
By uniting the numinous, the moral, the covenantal, and the historical, the incarnation of Christ provides the only framework through which the problem of pain can be rightly understood.
The problem of pain is not an abstract puzzle to be solved by human intellect.
No, it is a redemptive drama orchestrated by the sovereign decree of a holy and merciful God. He enters the brokenness.
So, taking this philosophical and historical foundation, we have to look at how this lands in the lives of actual people.
Yeah, the texts zoom in on the Apostle Paul's letter to the Romans, particularly the 8th chapter.
We have to set the historical stage here for everyone listening. Paul is writing to a first-century church in the imperial capital of Rome.
These people are squeezed by immense pagan pressures. This isn't a theoretical exercise for them.
Romans is not a detached treatise written by a philosopher who never bled.
Not at all. Paul writes as a beaten, scarred, and frequently imprisoned apostle.
He is writing to real Christians living in the center of a hostile pagan empire.
Surrounded by idolatry, acquainted with severe social pressure, and soon to know open hostility, state-sponsored violence, and martyrdom.
When Paul speaks of the sufferings of this present time, he is speaking from direct, agonizing physical experience.
He knows the crack of the whip.
The texts discuss the overlap of the ages regarding Paul's theology. This is a redemptive historical tension.
Christ has already come, died, risen, ascended, and poured out the Spirit. The decisive victory has been won.
The head of the serpent is crushed.
However, the final bodily resurrection and the complete physical renewal of creation have not yet happened.
Believers are adopted sons now, but they still get sick, their bones still break, and they still wait for the final redemption of their bodies.
They live in the tension between the already and the not yet.
And Paul uses a fascinating kind of apostolic math in Romans 8.88.
Yes, he writes, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us."
The word reckon implies a calculated accounting. He places present pain on one side of a scale and eternal glory on the other.
And the scale physically breaks under the weight of the glory.
And it is vital to notice that Paul never calls the suffering light in itself. He does not gaslight the Roman Christians about their pain.
In his other letters, he describes his own afflictions as incredibly heavy, even pushing him beyond his human strength to endure.
The comparison rests entirely on the eschatological weight of the future.
The coming glory is so immense, so physically and spiritually substantial, that present agony, though bitterly real and grievous, cannot stand on the same scale.
The Christian does not minimize pain by looking away from it. The Christian minimizes pain by looking through it toward the guaranteed glory God has promised.
But this waiting period involves severe difficulty. Paul gives a vivid description of creation's current state, utilizing the Greek term kinesis, which refers to the whole of creation.
He personifies the natural world as eagerly expecting the revelation of the sons of God.
Creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but by God's judicial decree following the fall in Genesis.
It is a good creation functioning under a heavy judgment.
But the key phrase Paul adds is that it was subjected in hope.
That distinction between a death rattle and a labor pang changes the entire framework.
It really does.
If a doctor tells you the pain in a patient's body is a death rattle, the situation is hopeless. The body is shutting down and the end is here.
Right.
But if a doctor tells you the intense pain a woman is experiencing consists of labor pangs, the pain is still agonizing, but it has a productive purpose.
It's producing life.
The earthquakes, the physical decay, the bodily weakness, these are the labor pangs of a cosmos awaiting its rebirth.
That brings up a critical question regarding the believer's personal experience.
A pervasive assumption in modern religious circles, heavily influenced by the prosperity gospel, assumes that if you have the Holy Spirit inside you, you should feel less pain.
Your life should be visibly smoother, wealthier, and healthier.
But Romans 8.23 dismantles that assumption entirely.
The text states that believers who have the first fruits of the Spirit actually groan within themselves.
The possession of the Spirit does not insulate you from the pain of the present age.
Those who have the first fruits grow more deeply, exactly well, precisely because they have tasted the goodness of God.
Before you have the Spirit, you might think the brokenness of the world is just normal.
But once you have the Spirit, you know what true holiness, life, and unbroken fellowship with God ought to look like.
Tasting the first fruits makes the believer long more desperately for the full harvest of bodily redemption.
The contrast between the holiness of the spirit within and the corruption of the flesh without creates a severe internal groaning.
And pain often confuses our prayer life. During these moments of intense weakness, when grief makes your petitions uncertain, Romans 8.26 and 27 offer massive comfort.
When pain makes you unable to even form words for prayer, the Spirit aids our infirmities.
Believers may know the broad promises of God, but they often do not know what to ask for in a specific acute affliction.
Should they pray for a miraculous healing, or should they pray for the grace to endure the thorn in the flesh?
I have sat with people in hospital rooms who are so physically exhausted and emotionally drained that they cannot string a sentence together to pray.
The theology here says that the Spirit intercedes with groanings that cannot be uttered.
The Spirit does not replace our prayer. He enters directly into our weakness.
He intercedes according to the will of God, and the Father, who searches hearts, knows the mind of the Spirit perfectly.
Beneath our broken, stammering words, our desperate sighs, and our exhausted silence, the Spirit carries the saints before God with perfect wisdom.
Even in the middle of this confusing, inarticulate pain, there is a massive, unbreakable structure holding the believer together.
This leads directly to one of the most famously quoted and, unfortunately, frequently misunderstood verses in the entire biblical canon, Romans 8.28.
And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose.
We have to be incredibly precise here because if we misunderstand the word good, we will completely misinterpret God's providence.
If you tell someone who just lost their job or received a terminal diagnosis that all things work together for good,
And they think good means they will get a better job next week or a miraculous medical cure tomorrow.
their faith will shatter when those things don't happen.
In this context, good does not mean a visible, immediate improvement in earthly circumstances.
Verse 29 immediately defines the good for us. It is conformity to the image of the Son of God.
God bends every single affliction, every tragedy, and every sorrow toward the final holiness and ultimate glorification of his people.
Think about looking at the back of an embroidery hoop.
Okay.
If you ever seen the back of a cross stitch, it looks like a chaotic, senseless mess.
There are dark threads, tangled knots, and threads crisscrossing in seemingly random, haphazard patterns.
If you only look at the back, it looks like a mistake.
But the artist is looking at the front of the hoop.
The artist is actively securing a specific, predetermined image.
God uses the dark, painful threads of suffering just as much as the bright, joyful threads to conform the believer into the image of Christ.
Looking at verses 28 through 30, Paul grounds this certainty in what theologians call the golden chain.
He lists these divine acts: foreknown, predestinated, called, justified, glorified.
Paul does something very strange with the verb tenses here.
He creates this unbreakable sequence, and then he says glorified in the past tense.
I initially read that and thought it was a grammatical error. How can a future event, our final bodily glorification, be written in the past tense?
It is a stunning rhetorical and theological maneuver. Paul speaks of a future event as if it has already been accomplished in the past because the decree of God is so certain that it cannot fail.
It's a guarantee. God's saving purpose is not fragile.
It does not depend on our fluctuating emotional strength.
Pain cannot sever the chain. Suffering is one of the very instruments God overrules and utilizes in walking his children to that Christ-like glory.
This theological certainty finds its bloody climax at the cross of Christ.
The text asks a very practical question. How does all this rigorous theological framework actually land practically when a person is sitting in a hospital waiting room or standing by a freshly dug grave?
Does theology actually work in the dirt?
To answer that, the text turned to the courtroom and battlefield logic of Romans 8.31 through 39.
The Christological fulfillment is absolutely central. Jesus is the last Adam.
In the first Adam, mankind dragged creation into corruption and death.
But in Christ, God secures the resurrection.
Jesus did not merely watch us suffer from a safe, transcendent distance.
The Son of God took on human flesh. He sweat actual drops of blood in the Garden of Gethsemane under the stress of impending judgment.
And he absorbed the full, unmitigated wrath of God on the cross.
The texts mention a Latin theological term here, tertius usus legis, which relates to the third use of the law.
The law functions to show us our sin, to restrain societal evil, and thirdly, to guide the believer in righteousness.
But regarding suffering, the massive point is that Christ's substitutionary atonement shifts the nature of the believer's temporal suffering.
It changes it from a judicial punishment into a fatherly discipline.
Because Christ exhausted the penal punishment for sin, our pain is no longer God's wrath being poured out on us as a judge.
It is a sanctifying tool in the hands of a loving father.
Paul uses a classic argument from the greater to the lesser in verse 32.
He says, "He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not also with him freely give us all things?"
The logic is inescapable and deeply comforting.
If the Father did not withhold his most precious possession, his own eternal Son, to secure your salvation when you were his enemy.
Will he withhold any grace necessary to sustain you through your present trial now that you are his adopted child?
Paul goes on to list exhaustive threats. He names tribulation, distress, persecution, famine, nakedness, peril, sword.
He covers every terrifying scenario a first-century Roman Christian might face, from starvation to state execution.
He covers everything we might face today.
I am reminded of the great preacher Charles Spurgeon, who suffered immensely from physical gout and severe depression.
How'd you say?
He said, "When we cannot trace his hand, we must trust his heart."
Paul concludes that the Christian is more than a conqueror.
We must understand what that phrase actually means in its historical context. It does not mean avoiding the slaughter.
Paul quotes Psalm 44 right before this, showing that believers may be killed all the day long. They are accounted as sheep for the slaughter.
Being more than a conqueror means victorious endurance through an unbreakable union with the crucified and risen Christ.
The cross does not make pain imaginary. It makes pain temporary, conquered, and completely unable to separate us from divine love.
Bringing all of this together, the Christian response to suffering is not a sanitized, superficial philosophy that pretends the pain isn't real.
It is a historical reliance on the sovereign God who subjected creation in hope, who entered our physical pain through the incarnation, and who secured our future bodily glory through the cross.
We do not have all the specific answers for every individual instance of suffering. We do not know why one person is healed and another is not.
But we know the character of the God who holds the threads of the embroidery hoop.
I want to leave everyone listening with one final lingering concept to mull over.
We have talked extensively about groaning and the heavy weight of living in a fallen, cursed world.
Consider this. What if the very tears you shed over the brokenness of this world, and the deep, inarticulate groans you feel in your own chest when you encounter severe suffering, are not signs of a weak, failing faith?
What if instead they're the clearest possible proof that the Holy Spirit is actively working within you, training your heart to reject the illusion of earthly permanence and causing you to intensely desire the resurrected world to come?
The next time you find yourself looking at the murky, confusing realities of pain when that clean, binary X-ray machine of life seems completely broken,
Remember that the diagnosis isn't found in the chaos of the shadows.
it is found in the sovereign hands of the one who holds the entire picture. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.